sure, maybe the US market is much bigger, but I think the growth rate in Vietnam is much faster.
That's Jacqueline, always positive.
Well, I'm not so optimistic. We're more on a contrarian view. Like for venture capital Vietnam right now, I don't see any clear exits yet.
Why do you think we haven't seen that many exits as yet?
Vietnam is not big enough, so that is why you have to have companies that address regional pain point or market. That would be the day when people say like, wow, I want to come into Vietnam.
What would be your advice for all the startup founders out there?
The tech ability in Vietnam is strong, but what's really missing is the ability to market.
If you're good, people will know about you. So will you need marketing? That's to be seen. I don't know, but I always believe that we hunt for good deals.
I'm going to respectfully disagree with what you said, because I think that,
I think at the end of the day, we need to have the people to actually bring anything forward.
It is about the people, but it's more so around who should do the marketing and identifying the right person for that.
And remember that whatever culture it is, when you expand internationally, you have to adapt to that particular culture.
If you have a technology, something proprietary that changes the world, that the investor can see that. That was before the marketing.
Some say that Jacqueline is very tough, he's a bit strict and he's serious. And Jacqueline is a bit more flexible, she has a softer approach.
Boy, they got that wrong.
So hello everyone and welcome back to Nguy Cơ Risk and Opportunities Season 2. And you know what? We had a great conversations with all the sharks on one of the episodes that you've seen. Behind the scene, we've got a lot of great conversations and discussions about startups between the sharks in Vietnam as well. And we would like to now bring it forward and let you enjoy the content as well on how startup founders in Vietnam could go global. What are the areas that you need to improve to go global, and what the ecosystem support that is needed to help promote and support startup founders in Vietnam to go global. Great content is awaiting you. So sit back, relax, and enjoy the show. Okay, so Louise and Linh, as entrepreneurs and investors with previous working and living experience in the US ecosystem, as well as having been returned to Vietnam and being engaged into the ecosystem in Vietnam, have you seen any differences between the two ecosystems, and what are your views on the ecosystem before you return and now, since you're so engaged in the ecosystem already? I'll start with Linh.
Okay, so I came back to Vietnam in 2008. And at that time, there were two venture capital funds. I worked for one of them. There was pretty much nothing else in the ecosystem. I mean, it was as nascent as, us having to go talk to parents to explain to them why their children should be entrepreneurs, right? So the ecosystem was super young. And now, 10, 13, 14 years later, there is almost every element you would need in a successful startup ecosystem. There are accelerators, there are angel investors, Series A through, E, F, G, whatever. There are foreign investors investing, there are local investors investing, right? So the ecosystem's really built out. And one of the more important things is that there are founders who are now multiple time founders. It's not just their first time, it's their second, third time. Sure, maybe they failed the first few times, but they learned from that. And so now when they're approaching me, they are much more seasoned, much more mature, much more realistic about how to build a company, about how quickly the company can grow. And so when I'm looking at an investment, it feels a little bit more feasible. It feels like, this company can really grow and scale and potentially go regional and global. And so, I think that the ecosystem has really kind of grown up, and I think there's a lot of potential here. And one of the other things you should look for, or either I look for as an investor, is growth rate, right? So sure, maybe the US market is much bigger, but I think the growth rate in Vietnam is much faster. And so if you're in it for the long run, which I am, then you look across, the next 10, 15, 20 years, where is the most opportunity? And I would say the most opportunity lies in an area that has a faster growth rate. And I think that Vietnam is definitely one of those places. So, for me, I'm happy to be here for, the foreseeable future.
That's Jacqueline, always positive, always looking to the future. What about you, Louise? What do you think?
Well, I'm not so optimistic. We're more on a contrarian view. I came back to Vietnam 2003. Back then, when they say venture capital, people have no idea what it is. It's still called đầu tư mạo hiểm, right? So that's not the right translation. It's not because you don't want to call it that. It just scares people away. But Vietnam, there's no word for venture capital. So the whole idea of venture capital back then was very nascent, startup. So the first company we went to see was FPT. So we look at FPT and CMC. And at the time, they weren't as big as they are now, but they weren't startup by all means. They have positioning already, but there weren't that many startups at all. So the idea of trying to set up a startup in Vietnam was, even though we set up the fund anyways, but I thought it would pick up steam, but it did not pick up until good 15 years later. Think about it, 2003 until now. It's quite a long time, right? So you look at the word startup, so a unicorn, or things that only happened in the last maybe 7-8 years, right? So so number one, back then it was definitely too early, 2003, 2005 time period, and now definitely better, but I wouldn't say it's great. Why? Because when someone come into a market, even if it has good growth rate, you need clear exits, and they have to demonstrate the company has successfully exited with good multiples for investors to come in. Why did the stock market in Vietnam in 2006, the stock market in Vietnam reach 156 points? It increased 156%. So therefore, that's why people put $3 billion into Vietnam Capital and the same amount with Dragon Capital, Indochina Capital, and so on, because people see that it's already proven success. The market already risen up. For venture capital in Vietnam right now, I don't see any clear exits yet. So you can say, okay, well, this company got bought out, or this company got bought out, or VNG is worth $2-3 billion right now, but they haven't exited. They have an IPO. They got 10 cents on there, and they talk about an IPO NASDAQ. So these are big opportunity, but it hasn't materialized. So it's still difficult to convince foreign investors to say, come on in. So yeah, the local guys coming in, the Malaysian, Singaporean, Korean, they think Vietnam startup's great, but I'm sorry, I'm still not quite convinced yet. Show me when there's a clear exit, the 2 or 3 exit where companies got bought out for large multiples, and investors say like, wow, Vietnam's getting hot. So for me, I'm optimistic, but I think we should be more realistic that it still takes a while. The company has to address larger market and has to command better valuation. Don't go out there and try to command better valuation by yourself. It has to clearly be worth something that you can say in the region, this is a great company, a company that can IPO in the Singapore or the Hong Kong market or the NASDAQ market. We haven't been able to see that.
Why do you think we haven't seen that many exits as yet?
Number one is Vietnam is still, we're like the 12th, 13th largest country in the world, right? So when we're first trying to launch IDG Ventures in Vietnam, we looked at the market, like why is US successful? Because they have great capital market, they can exit. You have NASDAQ, you have NYSE, you have great big M&A market. You have technology, you have barrier to entry, you have clear market that can consume. Vietnam, we're not. We're still the 12th, 13th largest country in the world. China, they're able to do that. And the South Korean, they're able to do that somewhat, but not necessarily the size of Silicon Valley or the US or China, right? So part of that is Vietnam is not big enough. So that is why you have to have companies that address regional pain point or market. So you can start with Vietnam first, like Linh said, I agree 100%. You have to be strong in your own market, but then you have to be able to capture Malaysia, Singapore, Indonesia, something like that, and then expand further to Asia and the rest of the world. So until Vietnam able to do that, it's going to be very challenging. So you look at the biggest unicorn right now that I only see VNG for Vietnam, right? So, and will they be able to maintain that position? Will they be able to IPO in the big market? I don't know. But that would be the day where people say like, wow, I want to come into Vietnam.
So lots of startups in Vietnam talk about going global, and obviously you like to see startups going global, but the truth is we haven't actually seen a lot of startups from Vietnam going global as yet. Why do you think that is, and what would be your advice for all the startup founders out there to be able to prepare themselves for going global later on. Linh, maybe you can start with that.
Sure. Okay. So when you look at startups in general, there are two jobs, right? You have two jobs as an entrepreneur. You create a product and then you have to sell it. That's it, right? If you can do those two things, the company is solid. And so I would say in Vietnam, the companies can build products really well, right? It's speaking to investors, speaking to CTOs across the region. Everybody agrees Vietnam is one of the top tech hubs within Southeast Asia, right? So I think the tech ability in Vietnam is strong. But what's really missing is the ability to market, to create a message and to get out there and educate people, because a lot of times you're building a product that people may not know about. So you have to educate the market. Then you have to figure out a way to acquire those customers, how to keep them, and then how to get them to spend more. So that involves marketing, messaging, communications, customer service, a lot of the soft skills that maybe the education system doesn't teach, that maybe within the job market, the skill sets aren't really there for the senior people to teach the junior people. And so that's really what I work on, is how to really teach the masses the soft skills that are necessary, not just in being an entrepreneur, but in kind of anything you do. So I think that is one of the weaker points that Vietnamese entrepreneurs need to figure out before they start trying to compete against the marketing strength of all the companies that are operating regionally and globally.
Do you agree with Linh, Louise?
Yes, to a certain extent. Lynn's very good in marketing, so of course I think she sees it in her view. I would add to that. We always believe that, like in the financial world, is there more money or are there more deals, right? So usually most investors would say that if there's a good deal, there's money. There's always money, but the quality of the deal is important. So if the quality of the deal, so if it's a startup that's addressing something that's very interesting, a global issue, and it has barriers to entry, like it's able to protect investors, like intellectual property, and then money will find it. Money will find it. Will it need marketing? Maybe. I don't know. Depends on the product. But that's what investors do, like institutional investors, like venture funds, angel investment, Shark Tank, family offices, all kinds of investors. That's their job, is to hunt. So usually people will hunt for deals. Deals don't hunt you. The deals don't hunt investors. The investors hunt the deals. So therefore, if you're good, people will know about you, because you work with an ecosystem that people, this founder, this is a serial entrepreneur that's starting a second or third company, or just word of mouth will get out. So your reputation will precede you. So will you need marketing? That's to be seen. I don't know, but I always believe that we hunt for good deals. So number one, so back to your question, is what does it take to succeed in the international market, right? So for me, I'm just repeating myself, but number one is addressing big market. It has to be Vietnam first, regional and international. Secondly, the entrepreneur has to think about barrier to entry. What do you call it? Intellectual property, things that protect investors. So you cannot say, if I invest in you, what does it take for next guy to do the same thing tomorrow with more money, right? So what is it protecting me? So it has to be some form of barrier to entry. And it has to come to bản quyền, intellectual properties, right? So trademark rights, things like that. And that has to be protected in international market, not just in the Vietnam market. But there's another way that we can think about. And when I first started IDG Ventures in Vietnam, or then after that with DFJ Capital, which I ran for a while, we looked at, since we were too early, so it's hard to have companies with proprietary technology, meaning like they do stuff like nobody else has. Everybody want to be Silicon Valley, but there's not a Silicon Valleys in the world, right? So all the good engineers are there. So are they in Vietnam? Maybe. But if they're able to create this company, then it was too early at the time. 2005 and 7, 8, it was too early. But there's another way to do it. It's called replication of technology. And I'll give you some example. Replication meaning you take an existing business model that is doing well in another country, such as the United States, in Europe, in China, and Korea, and you're trying to replicate it here in Vietnam. For example, Grab took over Uber. Uber is successful in the US, but Uber is not successful in Vietnam. It's the same business model. There's no intellectual property. So that's a replication. Another model, Lazada, Sendo, Tiki. What are they copying? Amazon. That's what they're trying to do, right? They're doing the same thing where they keep on pumping money in. They're at a loss, but they're still pumping money in because they hope someday there will be Amazon. Another model, okay? That would be VNG, Zalo, Zing, right? So what are they copying? WhatsApp, Spotify. These are success models already in the US, but you localize it. You localize it here in Vietnam. So you take a success model, okay, but you have to research, right? I guess you help somewhere, you went to the US, you study, okay, oh my God, this is great. I can bring it back to Vietnam and I can do it. I can find a great engineer, or I can write this code or create this app. That would be my 2 cents, right? You either have intellectual property, something proprietary, or you replicate something that's successful and you run really fast. You better have the right amount of funding, the right people, like Kevin said, the stream team behind you. So that's just my thought.
Thank you, Louis, for your perspective. I'm going to respectfully disagree with what you said, because I think that, oh no, I mean, I really think just because you have money does not mean you'll succeed, right? You mentioned Uber. Uber has a lot of money. They put in a lot of money into Vietnam, into Southeast Asia, and they ended up having to withdraw, right? And so it's really being able to speak to the customer. You have to tell them or show them how to use your product, and you have to educate them on why your product is better than the rest of the market. That's not really just about money, right? I mean, sure, money helps it, but you do at the core of it need to know how to create a message and how to pull people in, right?
But we weren't talking about money. We're talking about replication, right? We're talking about replication as a model, not necessarily money. I'm well aware that Uber got their butt kicked in Asia, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, because you started earlier talking about funds going out to hunt for the deals, and if it's a good company, there's always money, right? And so part of that implies that, right, if you get money and you get funding, doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to win, right?
No, that's not my point. Sorry, if I can address it real quick. It doesn't necessarily. I'm just saying there's always money available to chase good deals. That's the point. Doesn't mean like you have plenty of money and you can do whatever you want. Mm-hmm. But I get your point. Please continue.
Yeah. So I mean, I think that's the key thing that a lot of entrepreneurs need to keep in mind is, you have a lot of tech people and they think it's all about the product. And I agree with you, Louis, maybe because I'm more marketing focused, that I think marketing is harder. But I think at the end of the day, you get a bunch of really good tech people together in a room and you give them a bunch of pizza, they'll build a good product, right? But what you need afterward is, how to sell it. And it's not like you build it and they will come, right? I think it's more of, you need to analyze and make sure, right? We talked about the market, we talked about the consumer need. And then at the end of the day, you need to be able to make sure that people understand the product. Right. So I mean, I'm probably repeating myself, but I think that is one thing that all entrepreneurs really need to focus on is how do you sell your product? And so, when you first start off, if you're a tech entrepreneur, you really need to find a solid co-founder that has that marketing experience. And it's not just any business experience, right? So a lot of founding teams, I see you have a COO and a CTO, right? And the COO gets stuck with the marketing role, right? And people tend to think, oh, marketing's easy. So let me just put up some Facebook ads. Let me just start a TikTok account, right? And first of all, those two things are not easy, right? So just because you started does not mean that people will start following you. But second of all, that's not the only thing you have to do in marketing, right? There's a lot of messaging and strategy and content that goes into it. And I think that's one thing that a lot of entrepreneurs really need to keep in mind is you need a strong business marketing person.
Yeah, I think what I was alluding to a point is part of it is me being old school, right? In Silicon Valley, during the time I was growing up, which was years ago, many moons ago, it's the product that we were built back then was less marketing oriented like the world is today. Right now, the world, everything dictated by TikTok, Facebook, YouTube, Google, right? But the world where I grew up, that's when the internet was just nascent, about less than 10 years old. And so it's more about the technology behind it that creates intellectual property that people can recognize that this thing can revolutionize the way people live and how it makes their lives better. So that technology, when someone sees it, they get it. So that's what I mean. The money will chase after that technology. And the next step is, you have to evangelize, you have to market so people know about it. So that's the world today. And you need to know how to do that. And that's the part that I totally agree with you. But the earlier part, I think it's still there somewhat. If you have a technology, something proprietary that changes the world, but the investor can see that. That was before the marketing. So the money will chase that. It doesn't mean you have much money, you do what you want, but the next step is marketing. That's just my point.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree with you. And I think there are a lot of examples where a really good technology actually does not do as well as good marketing. And I would say, too, an example that we debate a lot in my household is Apple versus Samsung. Right? So I love my Samsung Notes. My husband and my sister love their iPhones. Right?
iPhone.
No way, no. Right. And then if you sit down and compare the features on each phone, you will realize that the Samsung has so many better features, and they got the features before the iPhone. Even the size. When I first got my Notes, like, I don't know, 7-8 years ago, all the iPhone users were laughing at me. Why is your phone so big? And then, of course, now what happened? The iPhone is bigger. But obviously, of course, now that the iPhone's bigger, it's cool. Right. But the thing is, right, the iPhone is still cooler. I have to admit, iPhone is cooler. Right. Even though the Note is better, but the cool factor is what gets people buying the iPhone more so than the Samsung Note or, any of the other Samsung models. And so, it's all in the marketing, right? People honestly think the iPhone is a better product. And that's what frustrates me, right? I can admit that iPhone does marketing better, right? But Samsung is a better product, right? But nobody cares. Nobody cares, right? They just care that it's better marketing from Apple.
Yeah, agreed. Part of this cultural thing, like the Apple's been around longer. It's always been the cool product. Samsung, the new coming, is from Asia, it's from the Koreans. Like there are many elements behind it. But I agree with you. It's a lot of it's marketing.
I'm going to jump into this conversation and bring it back to people, because I think at the end of the day, we need to have the people to actually bring anything forward. If we're talking about startup founders in Vietnam and their capability to bring their startup global, what would you say? What would be your advice for the startup founders here for them to be able to grow themselves and prepare themselves better to go global? Maybe I'll start with you, Linh.
It's a difficult question because I'm thinking I have a jumble of ideas in my head right now, right? So you start first with the product, right? You need a product that can actually go global in the sense that it is, back to what Louis said, it is a technology that is differentiated, right? So you cannot take a business model that already exists elsewhere, build it here because it's cheap, and then expect to take it back out globally. Right, so you do have to truly think of something unique that already does not exist in the global market. Right, so that's kind of the foundation. And then after that, as you start thinking about building up the business and how do you go regional, right? I talked a lot about marketing skills, but it doesn't mean that you're the marketer. It does mean that you have to recognize who is a better marketer, right? And especially if you are local Vietnamese, maybe your English is not native, then it's going to be hard for you to do things in English. But then at the same time, if you're based in the US and English is your native language, you're trying to come to Vietnam or you're trying to come to Asia and you don't speak those languages natively, then you're not the best, the English speaker is not the best person for those markets either, right? So it's really, back to what you said, Ji Vong, is it is about the people and especially about yourself as the founder, recognizing what your strengths and what your weaknesses are, and then being able to find the right people who can fulfill or fill in the gaps that you have, right? So I think that's absolutely essential. I see a lot of local companies trying to pretend they're global, and then I read something, and you can tell right away, a person who did not grow up speaking English, I've never seen someone write an English article 100% correct, right? Which vice versa, I will never be able to write in Vietnamese 100% correct, right? But the thing is, I don't pretend to, and I'll never try. I'll just hire somebody. And I think that's what local entrepreneurs need to realize, is that no matter how good your English is, no matter how many years you spent in college and working afterward, you didn't grow up in the US. And so your English will never be 100%. And so you should hire the right person to lead your marketing in those English speaking countries, because that's the first thing that will turn people off when they're coming from other countries, is they start realizing either that this company has a really bad marketing person who doesn't speak English that well, or it's a product that's coming from another country and they're not being transparent about it. Right. So I think that is definitely one. Again, it revolves around marketing, but it's more so around who should do the marketing and identifying the right person for that.
It's all about marketing for Lynn. The people have to be have anything to do with marketing. What do you think, Louis, from your point of view?
Yes, product. Yeah, product is very key. The product, you start with the product. It has to address a very major pain point. Cái điểm đau, right? So you have to know what the pain point is. How big is that? And then once you have the product, for me, it has to do with how you protect that idea, right? The intellectual property, and putting the team together, like Kevin said, this dream team. But that costs money. And then you have to be generous with equity, meaning like a lot of problem with startups is that they get together, but they don't really talk about who gets what. It's a Vietnamese thing. It's a cultural thing. But so people, they have certain assumptions when you walk into something, a group, and you assume the guy who started the company will be generous with you. But it's not clear. You work another year or 2, 3 years, and you start raising money, and all of a sudden you don't get any equity, or you get nothing. So equity is very key right from the beginning. So when you start a company, when you want to build a team, you have to be generous with your equity. But you can set KPIs, right? So like, okay, this person can come in, you can be the CTO, you're the chief marketing officer, you're my CFO, whatever. But it has to commensurate with their worth. So that's one thing that needs to be clear right from the beginning, is who gets what, right? To me, that's very clear in our business. It has to be right from the beginning, like, this is what you're going to get. And Lynn said something that a lot of people don't think about, but it's true. Like Lynn was trying to allude to the fact that English is very key. You either speak good English and you present well to investors, but if you don't, then your chances are low in raising money, in finding partners. Sometimes they can recognize you have a good technology, but it becomes a somewhat a rào-cản, a barrier. So because I don't understand you, or your language, it's not westernized, or it's because sometimes Vietnamese people, when we work with like Europeans, Americans, or Hong Kong, or Thai, because of our culture, sometimes we're not as straightforward. But being able to have a presentation, or be able to present in well-spoken English is very key. So give you an example. Look at all the top companies in Vietnam. Look at Masan, look at FPT, look at Vingroup. Who present investor presentation? Always a Western guy or some kind of well-spoken English person. It could be a Vietnamese kid that đi du học, like, he studied overseas, he came back, and now he works for Masan or whatever, or Vingroup. But the person who presents to investors is always fluent 100% in English. And Vingroup and Masan and FPT never got that wrong. And you start looking at large enterprises nowadays, they start to have people that speak English well. So I agree with Lynn on that, because a lot of time the deal fails because people don't understand you, or people, it just seems like they're not going to ask you, what does that mean? What does it mean? I don't want to look stupid. I don't want to offend you, right? I can't understand what you're saying, so I'm going to pass on the deal. I don't get it. Or send me the presentation. Or like, how am I going to communicate with you about the deal, like agreement, if I can't talk to you, right? So I think that's very important on the presentation, on sharing the equity, being very transparent right from the beginning. And the last thing is valuation, right? let's assume you have the product, you have the intellectual property, and it's a really good thing that's ready to go to market. When you start to talk to investors, don't go crazy on valuation. You don't start thinking you have the same price tag as Google, or Facebook, or Uber, or like Grab, things like that. You're not. You have to discount it a lot. So how do you discount it reasonably? Well, you can find that out by talking to mentors, like people like that. How do you reasonably calculate your valuation? So when you talk to somebody, what is the short thing that would say? Ngáo giá, right? Ngáo giá, is that what they say? Ngáo giá sạc bình, right? So like, that means you inflate your valuation. Well, you're not being reasonable, and that's one thing that turned investors off. Is you presenting a valuation that's laughable. It's like, how do you defend that? That turned people off. So I think those are the key things that you should think about. Anyway, that's my point.
Louis, you touched on a very interesting point, the cultural barrier. And you said that Vietnamese, probably because of our culture, we are not straightforward, and it's difficult to get who gets what. On that particular point, what would be your advice for our startup founders?
I would say, let's say you kind of feel pretty comfortable about a team. Like, let's say I got 4 guys, or like guys, girls, women, men, like a team that got together, and you say like, here's the team. I have 3. These are cổ đông sáng lập, right? These are founding shareholders. So there's always one guy, the CEO, the guy with the original idea. He controls it. He's going to be the guy that set up the company, has put in his name, he's put in chartered capital, business license, People are going to have certain chartered capital. People are going to contribute capital at that point. Or he already has. You have to sell that to people. He has to sell to the incoming shareholders. At what price, right? So it should be done sooner than later, because the later it goes, the company valuation change. Money changes everything, right? That's just sad, but that breaks up family, friendship, husband and wives. Money changes, so get it done right from the beginning. That you have some kind of shareholders agreement. You have some kind of agreement between each other that's enforceable, and that like, you get this many shares, or you have option to buy this many shares at this price, and here's your KPI. You need it to have a clear KPI. You meet it, then I will transfer the share for you, and it has to be legally enforceable. It has to be some kind of trọng tài. How do you say trọng tài in Vietnamese? I've been here so long, I don't say it anymore. Trọng tài. How do you say trọng tài? Referee. Right. So you have to. Mediator. It's not referee. Mediator. So things like, you have some kind of court in Singapore or Vietnam, thing like that. So that's my thing. It's part of governance too. Like you come into a company and like, wow, this founder, he's cool. He's right from the beginning. He shares people. He's generous. He's transparent. I can work with this guy. Who wants to work with a guy like doesn't talk about equity? And then you work your butt off, and someday this company worth something, and he just kicks you out, right? This happens all the time. It happens in Silicon Valley. It's happened everywhere in the world.
What's your view on that, Linh?
Well, I think if you're talking about culture, I think that it's definitely very important to consider the culture of where you are, the culture of how the product will be perceived, and the culture of the company or the country that you're about to enter. So I'll give you an example of a few products that tried to enter Vietnam. So Subway, I don't know if you remember, Subway sandwiches is a US product. It was very popular, still is very popular in the US. It's a great lunch meal in the US for people who are trying to be healthy, because you can get lean meats, you can get things that don't have very much salt, very much fat. And so when Subway entered Vietnam, I don't know if they realized, but Vietnam is a bánh mì culture, right? There is already a sandwich that is very, very Vietnamese, right? And that sandwich has pate, it has a meat, and it has like spices, and so it's very salty, but yet it's also kind of like sour, and it's got spice, right? So it's very, very strong. So then when you bring in a bland sandwich into a country that already knows sandwiches and that likes it strong, obviously you need to change the way your sandwich tastes, or you're going to compete against the national sandwich, and most likely you're going to fail. And that's what they experienced. And over a few years, the company hasn't succeeded. Same thing with ice cream in Italy, right? So you have Ben and Jerry's trying to enter Italy. Italy is famous for the gelato, which is very soft. Ben and Jerry's is very hard and tough. And so Ben and Jerry's opens a store, and the locals don't like it because it's too hard. The tourists are not going to eat Ben and Jerry's because they can get Ben and Jerry's at home. Why are they going to come to Italy to eat something they get at home? They're going to come eat gelato. And so Ben and Jerry's also failed in Italy, right? So those are some examples where if you have a product in Vietnam, you're trying to bring it to a different country, you need to learn that country's culture. Right? And the best way to do that is to find a person who is already strong in the same industry in the other country, and then have them be the country manager. Right? This is why you see a lot of people hire country managers in Vietnam, because that person needs to understand the culture here. And so you, as a founder in Vietnam, if you're going to Thailand, right? And the first thing is I recommend going close first, right? Don't go to Brazil from here, right? Start close. So pick a country that's close so you can travel easily, but then pick someone that's already lives there and is native and speaks the language, right? So that's the first thing, is understand the culture, get the right person on your team who knows that culture, and then have that person build the team and then start the marketing and start the selling, and then do one country at a time, right? Don't try to do 5 at the same time. I think Kevin mentioned that, where he tried to do all these around the world, all these countries. It's not possible. Even if you have a lot of money, you'll realize that each market has its own issues. And so you have one brain trying to figure out all the problems around the world, right? So really one country at a time, make sure each country is strong before you move into the next country. I think that's kind of the best go-to-market strategy for going global.
Before the talk show today, I basically Googled you guys to read a bit more about you. And I came across some of the comments from the audience of Shark Tank. Some say that Shark Louis is very tough. He's tough, man. He's strict and he's serious. And Shark Linh is a bit more flexible. She has a soft approach.
Boy, they got that wrong.
So what do you think about those comments?
Well, I think everybody has their standards, right? And they may be different, and the way we communicate it may be different. But I think at the end of the day, we're both investors and business people. And so for the most part, we will have the same criteria. How we talk about it may be slightly different, but we'll still look at the team, the product, the return potential, the exit, all of the stuff I mentioned above. But maybe we prioritize it a little bit differently. And we also have different backgrounds, different interests. And so, that's the other thing that entrepreneurs need to understand is which investor you speak to will really make a difference in your ability to raise that money, right? So if you have a product in segment A, you need to find somebody who already understands segment A, right? You don't want to spend the whole time. You have 1 hour with an investor. You do not want to spend 45 minutes teaching the investor about a certain market, right? One time I had somebody present to me, I think like a very complicated product about the heart. And it was like, heart valve something. And I'm like, you know what? I have no idea. I'm not a science person. I know nothing about the heart. I mean, I know how to love someone, but that's about it, right? So I'm the wrong person to speak to, right? So that's the point, is you need to find an investor who has a background, who can understand, but then who can also help, right? Who can add value afterwards. And so, I think that's the key point, is yes, each investor will be different. The fundamentals will all be there, but kind of like the icing on top will be different. And you need to figure out that icing, what flavor is each person, and pick the right flavor for you.
So Louis' flavor is the top flavor, obviously. Are you going to continue to play top at Shark Tank?
I don't know why they get that. I think, well, first of all, I'm from an older generation, right? I don't really spend time reading comments seriously, because sometimes if it's good, it's great, but if it's bad, you get really upset the rest of the day. So I'm always afraid of bad comment. That's why I don't want to read them. So I don't really manage my fan page or Facebook thing that well, or care about what people say. I think the perception that people think about you, it carries a long way, right? Because when I have different personality. When I'm at work, I'm serious. But when I'm not, like, because after hour, like we are now, was it almost 10 o'clock? We got to go to sleep soon. But then you're more relaxed. So we can chill together. It's okay, right? So we go at work, then people will have this perception. Okay, you're really serious because maybe your facial expression, you look really serious and mean, things like that. But I think it's just a perception. Everybody's like that. Everybody has a soft side. Everybody has everyone's vulnerable. They'll have insecurities, and so don't judge a book by its cover. That he's serious like that. I never intimidate by anybody at this age anymore. Like he wakes up the same way every morning. He puts his pants on the same way as you. So don't put people on that pedestal. Like don't think them so high. Like I don't care. I don't want people to call me shark. I'm not disappointed, but I accept the perception of what it is because it's my fault. I'm the one that created it. But if I have a chance to explain myself, I say like we're all human. We all respect each other, and I don't need you to think highly of me, or I respect you the same way. So put perception aside. The core thing is the value of the person, right? So what is he or she stands for? So I'm trying to pick a cause at this age. Like it's no more about maximizing return, but how are you giving back, right? You give back to the entrepreneurial community, you give back to the people, social, you give back to the environment. How do you stop global warming, all this poisonous stuff going on in food and river and water, things like that. So I'm trying to have a different stand in my life now. So make it more worthwhile instead of just go out there and say, oh, Lewis is this really serious guy, or he makes investment and makes money. It's not what I care about. Anyway.
You know what it is, Lewis? It's your resting face. It's kind of serious. It's kind of quite serious.
My resting face.
Yeah, like when you're not. When you're thinking.
I know. I don't smile. I look like my dad. My dad is really serious guy.
But it's serious, but then you're that guy too. So then that makes it like a double whammy, right? Because now people are intimidated by that too.
I don't know about that. Yeah. Anyways, thank you.
All right, thank you. Let's call it a night. And you are now officially released. Thank you so much, Louis and Linh.
It was fun.
Yeah, it's fun. It was fun. Yes. Thank you, Louis.
You know why it's fun? Because this is my only human interaction the whole day.
Oh, you live alone.
Congratulations.
Remember, we done a giãn cách, right? It was like kind of like lockdown, right? So therefore, I stay home all day. So I feel very happy talking to other humans. So thank you.
So there you go, everyone. There was such a tense discussion between the two sharks on various areas about startups. Even though there are some disagreements, but there are lots of areas that they really agree on. And some of the points that I would like to take away. Number one is the bánh mì culture that Shak, Thái and Linh mentioned. And remember that whatever culture it is, when you expand internationally, you have to adapt to that particular culture. You have to learn the market, and you really have to put your hearts and minds into learning, researching the market before you can actually launch anything. The second point from Shak, Louis, Nguyen is the transparency point of view. And this is significant in the startup world and significant for any investors who would like to invest into a startup. Because transparency is where you create trust, and that's where you can actually get the investors to invest into your startup. And both Shak, at the end of the day, agree that English, communication, and marketing are very important for you to be able to not only market yourself, but also market your startup, your products, your services internationally. So I hope that you have learned something today, and I wish that you will be able to take your startup global and be able to continue that journey to success. Thank you very much for watching the show, and I hope to see you again very soon.
Cùng Nguyễn Phi Vân trong talk show Nguy Cơ phát sóng thứ 5 hàng tuần trên vnexpress.net.